Okay, welcome everyone to the July Kizuna Studio Roundtable. This is a first for us as a community. We've been hosting sort of monthly spaces over on X, which are audio only. So this is our first sort of experiment on LinkedIn. Just a heads up, there will probably be glitches and we'll figure things out as we go because this is all brand new to all of us. But we wanted to have, well, I certainly wanted to have this idea of a studio roundtable every month as a way of discussing topics that all of us are grappling with in our own journeys and our own businesses. I think it's a wonderful way for people to get to know the members of our community and for them to be able to share their insights with everyone. So this month's topic is a topic that we have all spoken about quite a bit. It is a core value for our community. It is something that is deeply meaningful to me as well. And that's on the topic of authenticity. I do think I'm glad that we're actually talking about this topic on LinkedIn because I think if any platform really needs to talk about this, it would be this one. And um, I think what I want to start off with is, first of all, I want to introduce the people who are here with me today. We have Kat Zander joining us from Toronto, Canada. She is a marketing consultant in the health care field, but she's also a wonderful writer as well. She's an advisory member for the Kizuna Studio community and a very, very invaluable part of our community as a whole. We have Jorge Medina, also an advisory member of the Kizuna Studio. He is the founder of EasyBranding, which is just fabulous in so many ways with design, and he is based in Madrid. And we have Chris Fawthrop, who is joining us from Virginia, and he is a leadership consultant and coach. And we are so thrilled to have all of you here today to talk about this. I think it's three very, very diverse perspectives from people all over the world, which is really nice. So, starting off with that very sort of rambling introduction, let's dive into the topic. So I wanted to kind of start off by asking all of you, because I think I'm a big believer in kind of laying the groundwork and foundation for any kind of conversation. And I think authenticity and this concept and term, especially recently, has been sort of bandied about and tossed about in many ways by marketers. And as a marketer, I'm a bit embarrassed to say that, but it is true that it oftentimes loses its meaning. And so I want to kind of start off with kind of asking all of you what you think authenticity means to you. How would you define it and I think that's a good framework for our discussion today. Anyone?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, authenticity is often described as just be yourself or be real. And I think for me, it goes much deeper than that. There's a few concepts I think that tie into authenticity for me. One is alignment. And so making sure that my actions, my words, how I present myself is in alignment with who I am, what I value, and kind of what I want to contribute to the world. I think authenticity also requires a level of self-awareness. So being aware of, your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, and like lessening the gap, I think, between who you present yourself as online and who you are internally at your core. It requires vulnerability, though. It requires pushing back past fear and courage, because on LinkedIn in particular, as well as other social media channels, I think it's a hard balance to strike between presenting authority and credibility in your industry, in your business, while also sharing the real, vulnerable, imperfect parts of yourself. And I think that striking that balance is really one of the great challenges on authentic or online, because so much of the content that we create is out of fear of judgment, or to cater to the algorithm, because we're trying to get likes and comments and engagement rather than sharing who we truly are. So that's a little bit of a rambling idea of like what authenticity means to me.
I agree so much with what you said, Kat, and I often couple the concept of authenticity with the concept of masking. And to me, it's basically to not have to pretend, or as Kat was saying, to cater or fabricate some sort of image that's not 100% the way that I see myself and the way that I want to portray myself, whether that's in the workplace. And that's, I think that's the specifically the biggest friction that we have on being authentic on LinkedIn, that it's a social network that we coupled so much with the workplace, and that we have to look professional and successful and all of those things that we associate with those buzzy words, that don't necessarily have to fight against the concept of authenticity, but that we feel that we have to portray ourselves on a certain way. And I think that there's a big need for everybody to be as authentic as possible, to show that vulnerability that Kat was talking about, so that we connect more with the humanness, because we are not just all of us super high professionals, always successful. Obviously, there is no path towards success without failure. So the more that we share everything that we experience, the better for everybody to join together and connect. And it's more like a healthier online space, probably.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to follow up Kat and Jorge there, simply because I agree so much with both of what they said. I think kind of to top the last part of what authenticity means to me, particularly on LinkedIn, it is aligning all aspects of yourself to present that to the world at all times. But even in work environments or social environments, you don't always find yourself putting every aspect of you out there at any one time, because the people you meet, you all have different interests, even different clients who might be different industries, and so not everything is going to match up all at once. So I think trying to be authentic is making as most of yourself present at that one time as possible. Say if you have 4 components that are really important to you, your work, your life, maybe an artistic component or something else, as much of you that you can show at one time, to get as much across to the people at one time. That's being your authentic self, versus the different masks. Show 5 masks instead of just one, because they're still all a part of you. So rather than segmenting the parts of yourself, try and show as many at one time as you can. And that's kind of how you can be as authentic as possible, is reducing that personal and professional dissonance that we find in the workplace and amplified online, especially on LinkedIn.
I think these are all such wonderful, wonderful points that all of you made. I think there's a misconception with 2 misconceptions that I think I want to address with authenticity. Number one, people oftentimes, for a variety of reasons, feel uncomfortable about, for example, they don't want to share about their kids or necessarily their family life. And I think it's important to understand about authenticity is it doesn't mean you have to share everything. You have agency, you have choice in what it is that you choose to share. It's just whether or not, again, to all of your points, alignment, right? Is it aligned? Is it an honest reflection of what matters to you, what you value, and who you are? I think the other point that is often sort of misconstrued with authenticity is this idea of your real self as being something fixed or static. So people will go on this whole hoopla, this whole journey to try to find this one core thing, what is my real self? What is my real self? But to my friend Justin Castelli's point that he has brought up time and again, and I really deeply agree with him on this, authenticity is an evolution. To be human means to evolve. Change is the only constant, right? So our authentic selves is something that is in constant change. I am not who I was. None of us are who we were 3 years ago. Does that mean that 3 years ago we were less than who we were, or that we weren't really authentic? No, right? We were still who we were. We thought we were showing up in as real of a way as we could back then, but with greater, to Kat's point, with greater self-awareness, with greater self-understanding, of course, we're peeling away those layers of the onion and starting to understand things, and we shift and change, and that can communicate itself in a different way when it comes to authenticity, right? Okay, so I want to kind of circle back to something that Jorge said, because we are talking about the concept within the framework of LinkedIn or on this platform. And all of you brought up that very particular sort of resistance that we encounter on this platform because of the pressure, again, to all of your points, to appear with authority, to show up with authority, to not be judged. There is this kind of, I think, performative pressure there in order to be able to, whether it's validate our business or validate what it is that we're doing, our skill set, you know, our jobs, our work. And that's, I think, where a lot of people run into a lot of, you know, challenges and obstacles. How can I honestly be myself when my livelihood, when my job rests on this, and my colleagues and my bosses and other people who hire me, my clients, may see this? So let's start from that kind of framework. What are your thoughts with regards to that? Have you struggled with that? I know I certainly have. It's taken me a very, very long time for me to be able to move past a lot of blockages with LinkedIn. So deeply understandable. I think it's something very, very common on this platform. Any thoughts around that, all of you?
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Jorge.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so on my experience, I started sort of sharing online when I decided to start on entrepreneurship, and I began with X. I found myself very comfortable there because there is like a thriving, building public community, and it felt none of my former professional contacts knew me on X. So it was like starting from scratch, and it felt very free. Also because people were engaging in that sort of open conversation about the wins, but also the struggles of the journey of entrepreneurship. And I struggled a lot to come into LinkedIn because the goal of LinkedIn and why we are all in here is not just to share our daily lives, but it's a professional goal. We are trying to build our businesses. So of course, we are positioning ourselves, and that's completely fine. But it's how we think that to position ourselves as professionals, we have to be perfect. And because nobody would engage in business with someone that's weak, and that's I say weak with the biggest of quotation marks. So that was my biggest issue. But also a lesson that I got from X is that it was because I was sharing the struggles of the initial stages of my journey that I connected way faster and more meaningfully and deeply with people that eventually became prospects of my business and great connection. So I didn't see there was an issue in terms of those two aspects. And even besides the point of being professional, of having prospects, I learned so much and I enjoyed much more human connections, which it's something that is also a very meaningful experience of the professional world. It's not just building the business and getting as much revenue as possible. It's something that we do for at very least 1/3 of our lives. So it's not like we have to remove our humanness from something that we do so much. And that's something that I still struggle with on that terms of vulnerability, but that I keep experiencing more and more, that it helps me connect and makes the process more enjoyable and drives way more growth than just business-wise. And that's something that I really like about it.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that, Jorge. I agree with everything you're saying. And something that it's so interesting because inherently we all know that we are messy, imperfect, flawed people, and we connect with messy, imperfect, flawed people. I personally don't connect with people who present this facade of perfection because I know it's not real. And we all know that, but then it's still a struggle to actually take that leap and present all of, and to your point, Grace, we don't have to overshare or, share everything, but even sharing, some of the journey, some of the challenges, some of the lessons, some of the failures, it is still hard because that fear of judgment, I think, is innately wired in a lot of us. But what I would say is people do business with people, and leaders in organizations are people. And as people, we have the opportunity to create a facade and a culture of mistrust, a culture of protectionism, or we have an opportunity to create spaces and cultures where we're open and we're sharing and we're connecting together as people. And ultimately, whether you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, whether you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a writer, an artist, whatever it is, none of us are perfect. There is no magical destination that we get to where we have it all figured out. So the fear of sharing is only limiting us because we're losing that opportunity to learn from other people, to be supported by other people. And the one thing I would say is, I'm a little bit older than 30, and this is sharing more parts of myself has been a recent phenomenon. Like many people, I sort of pursued a corporate path, and I had this idea that I had to present myself in a certain way. But it's only recently, within the last year, that I've started sharing more pieces of myself, and I've found community with all of you and everyone else in the studio who have really shown up and supported me and shown me that it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to be myself, but it takes a little bit of guts and courage to actually take that leap. So, and I hope for people that do take that leap that they find a community of support and people who will hold space for them to be, who they are. And again, there is always that balance between the professional and the personal, and striking that balance is important.
Yeah. I love what you said there about striking that balance gap. And, one thing I want to kind of touch on, because I'm not sure who will be listening, but Gracie did ask about managing this stuff, kind of when you have professional oversight, whether it's an employer or something like that. And I think to people that are still kind of in an employee standpoint rather than developing a business or a consultancy, it can be very hard because LinkedIn, I think, is perceived as a job-seeking platform or a networking platform. So if you're active on LinkedIn, unless you're doing it for your company, I think a lot of insecure leaders and managers and companies feel like, well, what are you doing? Why are you posting? Looking for another job? What's going on? And you can still find a balance that will make posting on LinkedIn actually a safe place for you, and also make you stand up more at your own institution, your own organization, because be yourself in your role and post about your experience. So it's like, yes, I'm an employee at this team. Here's what we're doing. Here's how I'm trying to make things better or change things. Here's the problems that we're facing, how we're addressing them. If you're a leader at any stage in that organization, you can post similar things, and you can keep it nondescript, or if you have permission to use your company publicly, you can be more open about it. But you can still be your authentic professional self and find ways to insert that. And there's a place that I contracted to for a while, and the employees and some of the leaders that were encouraged to actually post, whether it was, hey, I'm doing this course and this is what I learned, or these are the things that the company is doing. But because they're putting their original spin on it, actually some of the company's clients would notice that, and it would look good on the company and on the person, and the person would then grow. So even though it can be hard sometimes to navigate those professional frameworks, it is still possible. And you really have to lean into, if you're in that position, you have to lean into how, not just how you make yourself look good, but also your company make them look good. And that way you don't necessarily damage yourself and hinder what's going on with you at the company or any professional stuff.
I love that you brought it back to those who are not entrepreneurs, Chris, and how that does the paradigm shifts, right? Obviously, if you are working for an organization, and LinkedIn is the de facto sort of platform for job search and career progression and things like that. I also really liked your point that, and I think it is starting to shift, which kind of leads me into this transition here. But to your point, it is starting to shift. I think companies and organizations are starting to understand that when employees share, when you have actual really good things happening in your culture, right, and your employees share that, it is a reflection of your brand and your organization and your leadership ability, and it is a positive thing for everybody. It's a win for everybody, right? I want to also kind of tie back to something that Kat brought up about the human element, and Jorge had also touched upon this, because I think this is really important, that reminder that business is human, right? That it doesn't, you could be the most accomplished person in the world, but if you are not someone that people like working with, it affects business, right? And I think for me, I've spoken a lot about authenticity as a way in which you can bring in, not only by being aligned with who you are and expressing that honestly, it paves the way to bring in others, whether that's prospects, clients, business, that are also aligned with who you are. But in order for that to happen, in order to be seen, we must first allow ourselves to be seen, right? In that context. So leading with that, about this idea of being human online and the importance of that, and the benefits of that, and the advantages of that, and what that can lead to, I want to kind of tie it into this idea of personal branding, right? And in this day and age, more and more, it's very clear that who you are, what you share, your ideas, your perspectives, this is what sets you apart. This is your differentiator. And it has become more and more critical, whether you are building your own business or you are working a 9-to-5, to have that in place, just as a general kind of a rule of professionalism. What are your thoughts on all of that around personal branding, where we're at in terms of that, where you see it going?
Well,
go ahead.
Go, Chris.
All right. I think that I'll stay in the lane of at the non-entrepreneur stuff, since I think Jorge and Kat can speak more to that. I think that personal branding is highly important. No matter what employment you find yourself in. I know all of you talked about how it's more important than a resume to a degree. And I think the biggest part for employees, make sure it is your personal brand and not just the company brand that you're representing. You are not necessarily your company or even your industry. And that's what can set you apart as a leader and make you more attractive to better opportunities, is being able to display yourself authentically within, tied to, but not completely of your role or your company. You might be in a spot where your company doesn't share your values, or maybe it does, and you need to figure out how to put that message across. It's a balance. So yeah.
Yeah, I always say that your personal brand exists regardless of how much attention you pay to it, because basically it meets at the intersection of what you do and how you behave and how other people perceive the things that you do, you say, and how you behave. And I understand the reasons why people feel cringy or reject the idea of building a personal brand, because they only see the superficial stuff and like creating that, pretending like that mask, that perfection. But I like to shift the perspective on personal branding into under the light of being a tool that's crafting that intentionally. And when you look at it that way, it's like it's great because you take agency on who you are, what you do, and how you want to do it. It serves to self-analyze, see how you want to do things and how you want to be seen in the world, aligned again to your values and everything that makes you not only a professional but also a human being, and then portraying that to the world in an authentic way. And that's, as we are saying, that it's a key differentiator that is going to be, it's increasingly important regardless of whether you're an entrepreneur or a corporate professional, because it sets you apart, and it is easier for you to connect, to express all the things that you want to do professionally, and it actually makes whatever you do professional easier because you can bring your whole entire self to the workplace. And pretending is very taxing, and it's not something anybody wants to do again for a third of your life every single day. So I like that reframing because it makes it into a humanly useful tool rather than a artifice of perfection or whatever people think it is.
Yeah, I agree with both of you, Chris and Jorge. And I think just to add on to that, to me, authenticity is a foundational principle of building a personal brand. You can't build an authentic, well, a personal brand that will be sustainable without authenticity. So if you're copying other people, if you're faking it, that will eventually catch up to you. And people can also sense when someone's not being genuine or authentic or, fully standing in who they are. And I think the other thing about authenticity, and it's important to personal branding, is just like we as people evolve over time, our personal brands and what that represents evolves over time. And so if you are truly building a personal brand based on a foundation of authenticity, it allows that flexibility and that room to expand and grow and change over time.
Yeah. I actually like to add to that it's also, I think, one of the biggest issues for people to actually start communicating and sharing on LinkedIn, that they do not allow for that space and evolution and growth that it's inevitably going to happen. So it's just about starting, and it's something that you get more comfortable with, and we have to make peace with the fact that a personal brand, just like you and as Grace, you were saying at the beginning, it's not going to be the same now that it's going to be in 3, 5, 10 years time, and that's okay because we evolve and change constantly. So it's going to be our personal brand if it's executed, as Kat was saying, from an authentic base.
I agree. If you don't mind me jumping in, Grace, I absolutely love what both of you said there, Kat and Jorge. Jorge, personal brand exists regardless of what you do with it. That you need to single that out, post that everywhere. That's gold right there. Because it does allow you to take ownership and agency of how you're perceived. A personal brand is a road to empowerment, whether you're an entrepreneur, an employee, a leader, anything like that. It allows you, especially if you are an employee or a starting up entrepreneur in a sea of other ones, to not just be a cog in the wheel, a face in the crowd. It gives you the ability to stand out if you are intentional and put just a little bit more effort into it. And it takes bravery and courage to be authentic, because we're told so often, don't be authentic, don't be you, just work within the framework of what we give you, what society gives you. And having to do that and pretending and being an inauthentic person, it leads to burnout. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest causes of burnout we see across everywhere. And I'd hazard a guess, and this can be a talking point or not if we have time. I think that inauthenticity and toxicity in workplaces can be traced back to a lack of authenticity throughout the chain of leadership. because the personal brand is not and should not be used to be like, this is who I am, and deal with it. Because if you are the kind of person that's, this is who I am, and deal with it, you can take it or leave it, accept my toxic behaviors or whatever. To me, that shows that you are not authentically yourself. You're putting on a mask to the world because that's what you think you need to do to be accepted. That's really, really not the case. So be your authentic self, but also, you know, be empowering to others to be their authentic selves. Yeah.
So many wonderful things here. I'm trying to remember what all of you said. It was just marvelous. I'm going to start with what Chris just said. Yes, it starts from the top always, right? If within your organization, you have a culture in which people struggle with being able to honestly express themselves, whether it's a question or feedback or their ideas on something, it's a mirror of what's happening at the top. Is the top able to foster that kind of culture and that kind of discussion and that kind of openness and honesty and community? Going back to what Kat said about a personal brand is rooted in authenticity itself. And I love that so much also, Kat, that it cannot exist. I mean, the very definition of a personal brand is personal. It's unique to you. And all of you brought up, you know, this point that I want to kind of dive into in this next section, because I think for anyone who is watching this, they're probably these internalized narratives, whether we've been conditioned to think them from, you know, the people around us, whether it's societal, cultural narratives, are so deeply rooted in all of us that, you know, there's this tremendous fear and resistance that arises. So yeah, I want to be authentic. Yeah, I hate putting on a mask. Yeah, I hate it. But how do I do it? How do I do it? I'm like so scared. I'm so scared. So I'm wondering if we can kind of dive into that in each of our own personal ways. Jorge, you touched upon a little bit about how coming from X helped you make that transition over to LinkedIn. I'll start off by saying that for me, like I said earlier in the conversation, also tremendous blockage for me. I think there are a number of things there too, some odd sort of realizations have been happening that I've realized recently about things like, I think also like the further along you are in your career, meaning in terms of the career ladder, there's also a weird sort of pressure that gets built in a different kind of way, because people are looking at you or expecting you even more so to kind of fit into a particular a box of what a corporate leader or a business leader should behave like. And of course, you've lived many more years in which those narratives have had much more time to kind of take a deeper root within us. So it's a bit hard to challenge that. One of the things that helped me, that really kind of was an aha moment for me, was when I realized that LinkedIn is just another social platform. And I'm coming from a content marketing, social media marketing background. And once I realized that LinkedIn is exactly like Facebook, exactly like Instagram, exactly like, except it's just couched in this framework of, we talk about jobs here, or we talk about work. But as soon as I realized, oh, you have agency and control over what you want showing up in your feed, about what you share, about who you interact with, and that you can cultivate a community and the people here just in the same way you would do on other platforms. As soon as that clicked into place for me, that was what helped me tremendously. It kind of removed the additional pressures that come around sort of the professional sphere. And I decided that I was just going to show up the way I am. And you know, I'll find people here who resonate with that. And that's it. And I don't really particularly care about, you know, about what's outside of that. So that was kind of my approach. How have all of you battled those kind of fears or struggles and tackled it on LinkedIn?
I can go. Well, yeah, so to your point, Bruce, about the higher up in the corporate ladder you go, I think it's because you are expected to reinforce the framework that got you to that point. Either by the people at the top or the people below. Because if you're already at the top, well, how dare you betray the norms that got you to this point? Are you ungrateful? Should we cast you out? And then for the people below, it's like, oh, well, if they're changing the system and telling me not to do it that way, what am I supposed to do? Because it puts it to the lower tier of leader and employee, and almost puts an onus on them to be more creative, find a different way when they're told over and over, no, do it this way. That could be terrifying. But as far as cultivating community and engaging on LinkedIn and using it as a social platform, what I've done is engage, and I've looked for companies and people that are kind of talking about the stuff I talk about, and I'm interested. I worked in several different careers. I worked in craft beer, military, open source intelligence, and academia, a few corporate things. So I am lucky to already have a lot of different disparate interests and groups already on LinkedIn. And so I can just kind of go through and be a bit more selective. Okay, yeah, I want to talk about that today and engage on that, and so on and so forth. And you'll find that there are people that are talking about this, and just engage. You know, it's like, oh, this is a great idea. Or put in your thoughts. Hey, I've seen that too. This is what I did. And the more you do that, the more it'll show up on your feed, the more that you'll find more people, more communities you can engage with. And it will take a little bit of time, but you'll start to get people engaged with you, want to connect with you. So yeah, just use it like a social platform the way you would any other.
Yeah. To your point, I think the conversation in LinkedIn is changing a lot. I think we've discussed this within the community plenty of times, but we all know this face of LinkedIn and that infamous post of like what I've learned from my engagement and all of the business lessons from dealing with my wife and stuff like that, which is tremendous. But there is a lot of new voices that are changing the narrative, and we do have the agency to transform what shows up in our feed and what we contribute to in our feed. And it's something that we talked a lot because the community started from X, and that's it's something that you, Grace, taught us. It's to be very free with the block button and to just basically cater to what you don't like to see and what you do like to see. So the algorithm actually is able to learn what you want to see and what you want to engage with. And I think LinkedIn's algorithm is quite good in that regard, in that it really does show up what you are engaging with, and it builds up that momentum. And besides the engagement in the community, I think it's also like if we want, because I think everybody is aware of the power of LinkedIn and how powerful it can be to our careers and our businesses. But if we want it to be a positive force, it's also on us, the individuals with our agency, to change the narrative and challenge and build the conversations that we want to see in the platform, and then not just complain that the crypto bros or whatever finance bros are doing, but rather add our perspectives and add our voices so that we can slowly shift that, and also encourage other people who are maybe afraid to share their authentic voices and their experiences from a much healthier space to join our conversations, so that we don't just cater and create that void of fake talk, but rather move the conversation to a more authentic space.
Yeah, great points. I'll just add that on LinkedIn, my activity really happens in the DMs. So I don't post a lot, but I have a deep network on LinkedIn that I've formed over years in the same industry. And part of the opportunity of LinkedIn is to have those personal conversations, but that also requires authenticity. So I'm not the smartest consultant, not the most experienced person in the industry. I do have a track record of success, and I do have experience and knowledge that is valuable, but presenting myself, who I am fully, is also part of why I continue to do business in the same industry over years and years and years, is because of who I am and the unique perspectives and voice and lens that I bring to such a complex industry that is facing very difficult challenges, very complex issues, and that matters. And if I was too afraid of bringing personal experience into it, or bringing, my voice into it, of presenting myself as who I am not perfect, and I am not claiming to be. But if I wasn't presenting myself fully as I am in those engagements on LinkedIn, I wouldn't be getting business and, contracts and, clients year after year after year. And so that's part of it. So I think that there's two goals of LinkedIn, or two different paths that you can take. One, of course, is sharing content and all of that, Chris and Jorge talked about. But then eventually, if you do take it off the content feed into, the DMs and have one-on-one conversations with people, you do need to show up authentically as who you are. And, that what you share in the feed needs to translate into what you share in personal conversations as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add to your point, Kat, that it's again challenging that perfection narrative, that when there are behind businesses, there are always people, and people like other people. So it doesn't matter if you're not perfect, but precisely the thing that is probably going to make you get the business is that there is a human connection on a human level based on your peculiarities, and not because a lot of people can do all of the things that we can do, but nobody is ourselves specifically. And to your true self, you will have a X scope of prospects that will really align with you and will gladly do business with you, even if you are less or like worse than another option, but it's because you are you. And often in business, it feels as if the objectively best option is always going to take the entire market, and that's not the reality of it. No services or products usually are not a monopoly, but rather there is enough business around for everybody. So the more that you show up authentically, and especially also through the DMs, because I think that the content's like the upper funnel just to get a bit marketing on it, but then you have to go deeper into the conversations, to especially in consultancy and services, to get that business and show us your true self, because that's, as your point, Kat, and how your experience is, it's a testament to it, that you get not only more business, but better business, because you also have to like who you are doing business with, so not to not burn out, because we all know what it's like to have shitty clients. So if you don't express what your values are, you're probably not gonna attract the type of clients that you want. So it's, I think that's interesting.
Just to quickly add on to that, and you're 100% right. In like the early days of business, it's a little bit scary, and so you want to take any client that is willing to sign with you. But then eventually you get to a point, and this happened to me as well, where I started to align my values and who I am and what I wanted to contribute to the world to my client base. And that took time. It wasn't sort of something that I was able to do right out of the gate. And business is an evolution. But I do think that tapping into what you said, like the recipe for success, at least in consulting and service-based businesses, is, you do need credibility, you do need experience, you do need knowledge, you do need those skills. But you couple that along with your values, who you are, what you believe, who you want to work with. And then that there forms your unique differentiation in the market. And it informs, who you are and what you want to build and create in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all really kind of hearing the same thing over and over again here. But people saying not just an authentic you, but a real person will make your brand or your company more attractive than the other ones. To know that there is an actual person there at that company that works, and it's not just, the company page posting whatever inspirational content or feed, but to know that, oh, there are actual people there. Because think about the amount of times you go for tech support, or any company, and you get an automated response back. Like, oh, okay, it makes you stand a little bit less attractive. And if somebody is searching for a consultant, and they send that they can get in contact with 3 or 4 different options, because people can fill out their options, and you get 2 people back with like, oh, thank you for messaging us, we'll be back right with you. And then you, the authentic person, come in, oh, hey, thank you for messaging, blah blah. Just knowing that there's a person there, that brings connection, which a lot of us are missing in the increasingly digital age. And then also, in the face of AI, humanity. That's a way to combat all the fear we have about AI coming, is, oh, I'm speaking to a real person. And you can only do that if you put your brand out there and don't just post like a robot.
Fantastic points, everyone. Everything about the DMs and the community that we build here, like on any social platform, it comes down to relationships, right? And that relationship is, of course, a very human one. What's so interesting about this conversation as I'm listening to all of you, our humanity, our humanness, is both our greatest unifier and our greatest differentiator. It unifies us in the sense that every single person feels the fear of putting themselves out there, of being sort of what we talked about, vulnerable, open in that way, because it opens up the possibility, of course, of possibly being hurt, of experiencing pain, of being rejected, or feeling, all these things about not good enough or not being validated, etc. And I think it was Chris that brought up this word earlier. This whole thing about authenticity is truly one of empowerment, right? Because it requires trusting ourselves enough to be able to Jorge's point, build our own table. If there's not a seat at a table in a narrow sort of box that you can fit into, well, then create your own, right? You have the agency to be able to do that. And there will be those who will sit with you there at the place that you create. So I wanted to ask you this, because we're leading into the humanness and the humanity area, which I think is an important element of this conversation, because again, to Chris's point that he brought up, that as everything continues to evolve rapidly with AI and everything, it is going to become the most important, I think, part of business, and of it's going to come much more to the forefront as so many things get taken up by technology, etc. So, and yet at the same time, to just be who we are, to exist in our humanness, is like the most challenging thing in the world. So we're all collectively facing this massive sort of challenge right now, I think, because the era that is emerging before us will require all of us to be able to move through that fear and step up to the plate in that way. It will ask us to do that. So I'm wondering if any of you can share whether it's through the support of others or community, whether it was a moment that you understood something for yourself. Do you recall a specific moment where you thought, oh, now I understand it's okay to kind of stand in who I am? Was there a specific moment? I know it's an ongoing process. I mean, I'm always going through it all the time, fear and anxiety and battling all of that. But for example, for me, this past year with the Kizuna Studio, with the community, it has been absolutely transformative. And that's not an exaggeration whatsoever. To really feel like there's a place that is safe for me to talk things through, whether that's bouncing ideas or like talking about like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out right now. I'm like, what are we going to do this LinkedIn Live? And I can't believe we're going to, all of this stuff and just kind of saying it very freely without anyone judging, truly has been transformative. It has been liberating. It has completely, I think, shifted in a much more profound way my understanding of leadership, certainly, of what is possible with community. And everything with Kizuna this past year has also been because of this community. So I know for me, that has been a huge part of this journey, just in my own personal evolution. Do any of you have sort of a moment in your life where this kind of humanness where you've been confronted with, this is how I need to kind of stand in myself. This is where I need to, I can't perform anymore. I can't be behind a mask anymore. I can't do this anymore. Any thoughts around that? I know we're getting deep here, folks. All right.
Are you going, Chris?
I can. I'm happy to if you don't want.
I'll go after you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I've had several stages, several points in the past year where I have both stepped into myself fully and terrified of it, step back in, step back. And it has only been through acceptance of myself, where I have been when I had tried to step out, and understanding why I stepped back, why it wasn't comfortable for me, and then being willing to again go back into that uncomfortability. I mean, think I was talking with Grace about this recently. Growth, leadership, authenticity, and it kind of exists in a liminal space that is never set. And the moment you step out of that liminality, it becomes fixed and you're no longer growing. And you have to step back into that uncomfortable stream to grow further. So I would say that my stage in which I am realizing who I am is when I'm actually in that uncomfortable process. Now I know that's pretty meta and all that, but no, some of the biggest points were when I shared some of the parts of myself that, like my personal journey with some of my injuries, overcoming that, and then taking some of those core concepts and translating into how I think about leadership. There's been a few posts in particular that I've done that really resonated with people, and I got DMs or I got a lot of engagement, and realizing, wow, by being honest with what I am, like, I guess, vulnerable about or worried about sharing, the feedback on how that's helped other people has made me realize, wow, that this is actually something that is beneficial. So it's okay to feel this uncomfortability and to put that out there. And to your point, Grace, our humanity can be our greatest unifier or our greatest divider. So if you're putting a mask out there, that's what people will identify with, because they're assuming that that is you. Unless it's just blatant, they're not going to necessarily think that it's a mask. They're going to think it's you. And so then if you do try to connect when it's your authentic self, later the mask drops. It's not who you were. Oh, and it's not going to be the same. So your authentic self is what is going to get you the deepest connections, both to understanding yourself and other people, whether that's in business or personal life. So.
Yeah, I love that, Chris. So this is such a meaty question, Grace. But
you all know me. You all know me.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so my perspective. Okay, so for many, many years, I had this sort of lone wolf mentality and this idea that I had to project strength. And I'm old enough to have a pretty good sense of who I am and what I believe and what my values are and what I stand for. But over the course of my career, I've spent my career telling other people's stories. As a marketer, I, adopt the voice of others, of other companies, and I integrate myself into their world. But I have a rich inner world too, with lessons and experiences and things to share. But the question I could never answer for myself was why? Why should I share? Why does it matter? What is the point? And so over some time last year, I decided that I wanted to kind of dive in and do some experimenting with sharing some stories and just kind of coming from my own perspective, my own experiences. And it was community that allowed me the safety to continue that and to answer the question of why. So authenticity for the sake of it is important, but the question I think that is something that I had to answer for myself, and why everyone needs to answer for themselves, is why? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to build, create, share, contribute to the world through who you are, through sharing those vulnerable parts of yourself? And so it was many moments over the course of the last year, with this community, everyone in the studio here, and just building those connections that really allowed me to answer that question of why, and have helped me continue to explore and experiment as I go down this path.
I love both of your answers, and I really like that why. Like, to me, it wasn't a particular moment in time. I think I get closer to the Gen Z, although I'm not Gen Z in that regard, but like, I was never one to fit in a single box, and I've done a lot of job hopping because I studied translation, and then I jumped into digital marketing, and then I went into product management. So by the time I decided to try to build my own company, it was like no surprise to anybody, because it's sort of, I have to try. It's the only way to like fully embrace everything that I am. But throughout this year of trying to build my personal brand and sharing online, that's also why I've become so passionate about personal branding as an intentional tool, because it has as an intentional tool with the goal of being authentic as well. It has been such a challenge, and like, I don't want to sugarcoat the fact that putting yourself out there and doing it the way that we are discussing is very challenging. As Chris was saying, it's like you step in and you're super motivated, and then you step back. It's like a constant tug of war. But it has been through engagement with either complete strangers on the internet, especially within our community, that I've seen just also how powerful it is to share all of who we are, because it creates those moments of connection that you see that there's an impact. And that's a big, as to Kat's point on the why, I think it's just a very important moment now. Like, the braver that we are to show ourselves fully and authentically, in full alignment with who we are, what we want to do, how we want to do it, and with all our sets of whys, the more we can inspire others to do the same, be their full authentic selves. And maybe I'm like very optimistic or like idealistic, but if the whole world were just their whole selves, brought their whole selves to the table, the world would be amazing, because we wouldn't be faking and pretending to be anything else. We would all know our why, which is also something that I like about personal branding, about that, like, you have to do the work. It's not just I have this sticker and this is me and I just show it to the world. You have to look for it. You have to do the introspective work. You have to do the work to understand yourself and know what you want to bring to the table. So it's not just it's hard. It's not easy. And I think to me, it has been very beneficial to be in this journey with the studio, because we are all in our very internal struggles, trying to bring our whole selves to the table. And it's not something that I just like Kat, I've always been like very independent and do it all by yourself stuff. But being in a community and seeing how all of us struggle, and we are just strangers all over the world that meet online, but we find comfort and community and support, and it's been such a transformational experience in trying to find ourselves. And it's a forever process, probably, but I find myself much happier and in this ongoing journey of finding it myself and sharing it with the world, and then joining up this authenticity journey that we are all going through.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with what you said, Jorge and Kat. And you both said something that is so awesome. I think kind of like ties this all together. It's a combination of why and what do I bring to the table, right? The moment we understand who we are, because we're all trying to provide something to other people, but also to ourselves at the same time. The moment you understand who you are is when the inauthenticity no longer serves its purpose and no longer benefits the people that you are working with or for. If you are a leader in charge of a team, I know for me, the moment that my corporate mask, I wasn't able to hold that up anymore, it was not good for my team, right? And I realized that I had to be my authentic self from day one in all aspects. Otherwise, I couldn't stand up for them. I would get burned out. If you are not yourself and you're trying to develop a business, it's the same thing. So your why and the whole understanding yourself comes from how far can I wear that? How long can I wear this mask? Well, if you're not wearing a mask at all, you'll be able to go, it's limitless. You can go as far as you want, as far as is needed.
So beautiful. The why is where we find meaning, right? That's where meaning is found. Everyone, this is the kind of extraordinary members in the Kizuna Studio. If you are interested in joining our wonderful community, there is information on our website at kizunastudio.co. Everyone, can you share where everyone can find you, your socials? What's the best way to connect with you?
Oh my goodness. What I don't know what my handles are. Hold on.
She'll be tagged. She's tagged somewhere in this.
Okay.
Mine's easy. Chris Fawthrop, just as you see on the screen, or as my name on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn and X. You can find me both of those places.
Yeah, I think mine's Kat G Zander on X and Kat Zander on LinkedIn. So
Yeah, mine it's at the Jorge Medina on X and just Jorge Medina on LinkedIn. But you can also find me EasyBranding.io. It's where I do everything.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me on this Wednesday afternoon. We got through it without a glitch, I think. I haven't looked at the, I don't know, we'll see the recording, but hopefully we didn't freeze on a frame somewhere and it actually went okay. All right, thank you so much. I adore all of you. You know how I feel. Thank you again for, yes.
Where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me. You can find me at Kizuna NYC on X and YouTube for my podcast there with Grace. And on LinkedIn, you can find me at Grace-Kizuna, I believe is my URL. See, again, we're all still making my way on this platform. All right. But I appreciate all of you so much for this wonderful conversation. Thank you. Thank you for reflecting the values of this community. Thank you for your courage and your bravery and your honesty. It always, even if we may not see it right away, the ripple effects of impact are always there. So thank you so much to all of you for showing up today. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon if anyone's watching. Thank you.